So we start we start this as Loki is showering, while the mother of all, or all mother, interrupts to give him a mission which he sets out for the Avengers Tower, just to get attacked by Thor and get saved by Hawkeye and Black Widow. He gets questioned, and as we all know who Loki is, he fools everyone, causes a fight, and escapes to retrieve data on himself for reasons you will know as we move on. One thing that's shocking enough was the fact that Thor's hammer was getting heavy, in which he could barely lift it. And as Thor tried attacking Loki, he stabs him with a special sword once held by Sigurd, which would be explained as we advance. Now, the sword gets rid of evil in Thor, which made Thor unworthy of Mjolnir, and that evil was caught and brought back to the All Mothers. And and also, like I always tell you guys, take notes of those little references of comics and issues by Marvel, which you should indeed go read. And behold, this foul creature is Loki, but not just Loki, but a supposed old king Loki. And next up, we see our boy Loki go on a speed date with a very intriguing character and a type of girl. Personally, I would like to meet, which you might know why as we move on. If you're a cultured person on old morals, which women acted upon, unlike modern women, but this lady is more like a mix. Let's meet Verity, who is a human lie detector, and she met the god of lies as they converse. He talks about his moments with Lorelei, even the one she had with Thor, and basically that was his second mission to bring Lorelei back to Asgard. As he talks to the All Mothers, you must have noticed this statement of him being the new iteration of Loki. Well, that isn't a lie. Go read Young Avengers 2013, in which a young Loki got killed by older Loki towards the end, which is this Loki, and you will understand how Old King Loki plays in this. And we see that Lorelei is a thief who basically can't work because she hasn't lived hadn't lived on a mortal world for too long, and her fastest means of income was thefts. But Loki, of course, joined her, in which she had no idea until he tried capturing her, and she escaped through a portal. And even while talking to Verity, only Verity sees him as Loki. We then get a bit of a backstory from Verity because of her lie detecting powers, in which she couldn't have a normal life at all, but read only science related things as her powers saw them as truths. And as Lorelei passes, he follows her and is having a conversation while in the depths of Asgard. You have King Loki watching. As we see King Loki walk out of Asgard, then the story starts getting interesting. Now, look at the dialogues. Like, Loki is supposed to get rewritten, but he sort of manipulates the narrative, and we will see as we move on. Loki basically walks through the panels of the comics, and while reading this, I thought I was mad, but unfortunately I wasn't because I wasn't wanking as I read on. He walked from the present right up to the past, changing the author's attention in the supposed context, basically um beating author's intent. He goes to meet young Odin millennia ago, in which he becomes Odin's friend, and as they walked having adventures, they came to a river bank and they saw an otter as large as a man, in which Loki killed it, and it bothered Odin so much. But as they went in to drink, they unfortunately met the brothers and father of the boy, who was an eel, or who was an otter as a form of punishment or training, if I remember clearly. But long story short, It was taxed to get coins or Odin gets slaughtered, which happened. Odin didn't get slaughtered. Old King Loki joined Sylvia. Loki got the coins and Odin was safe. Old Loki journeyed to somewhere, but before going, he tells Odin to build a box big enough to fit a sword in it. And as he came back, he came with a sword created from the concept of magic, time, and narratives, in which this sword did belong to Sigurd, which was locked up in the mountains. Sigurd then took it to the mountain Tibet, usually known for its level of spirituality even in our real world. He took it to Master Kalu, who was the master of black magic. And Sigurd, the ancient hero of Asgard, explains to the story behind the retrieval of his sword from Loki, in which they had to fight, but Loki understood the trap Sigurd was getting into, so they somewhat planned the whole fight and Loki's death, in which Loki used his invisibility belt to add his blood to a contract made for two, negating it, in which this being was Mephisto. And he commanded Mephisto back to his realm, as well as sending Sigurd to Asgard, while he also used Mephisto to kill his newer iteration. So they then decide to break into one of the prisons of Asgard, in which they needed a distraction for Heimdall, which was Thor fighting in space. And as they pass through obstacles, they get to their final stop, in which Loki's deal between Lorelei and Sigurd ended, which his main agenda was to find something supposedly the mothers was hiding. And by now, you must have seen in the scans that Loki is doing all this to cancel out his bad deeds and is trying to be good, in which this Loki is good but at the same time isn't, which he lies to himself and acts based on lies and narrative changes of himself via narrative mischiefs, overriding or rewriting his origins as the god of lies. And as he opens the door, he sees his supposed future self, in which makes fun of him on the prejudice of him changing, and Loki tries stabbing him with the sword of truth made from all I said earlier, which basically tells the truth of one's true nature. As Old King Loki says, he saw the cause and effect, which is causality manipulation, which changing the narrative by going through the panels of Marvel to supposed ancient comics of Odin that had never been written, but can also be interpreted as going to the past for the simpletons. And basically, this Loki is actually the bad side of Loki cast away by lies, as I explained earlier, of being good, basically manipulating his narrative, and they both are actually the same person, which you will see at the end. Loki even knows the future of Asgard, as he sees through and beyond the plot being written and before it is written. Doom goes to the far future and sees the great discord caused by Loki, in which Doom was going to get killed by Loki, and immediately he sets back for the present. He goes to capture Loki while he was getting shouted at by Verity, who got stuck with Loki's madness and actually cares for him. He even managed to lie to her. And Doom wants to talk to Loki about reality. Now you guys take note of these parts, because this is just major feats for Doom, which is insane as you look at the scans. 1. Each universe in the local multiverse, with each multiverse which has an infinite amount of them and infinite dimensional constructs for each multiverse, and he travels immeasurable distances, in which immeasurable in this context, which it usually is basically something infinitely unquantifiable beyond inaccessible cardinals, by creating such time machines which is immeasurable speeds quite easily, as well as him being able to rule over time across higher hyperversal constructs to the point of quantum levels. The next act is called the story of Doom, in which people like Loki, who can manipulate the narratives of himself, who is a living metaphorical archetypal platonic concept of myths and stories on a high universal scale, in which Marvel just as pure existence. Loki says that since magic is story in Marvel, because magic manipulates reality which they vary, then him, Doom, would just need to tell his story. And sorry, it was Doom who said that. Just need to tell his story to manipulate beings of story and platonic archetypes, which Loki can manipulate the story of a collective unconscious story, but Doom would manipulate such magic of stories. And Doom says that time plus space is narrative, and anything that moves through it becomes a controller of their narrative, in which he goes on to seal a being of such existence who can manipulate his story from even another comics, making himself the new iteration without the writer's consent. But yet, Doom makes narrative manipulating technology that can store Loki in a place without time, space, and narratives, which he would be frozen forever, which is a conceptual transcendence over the plot of his nature, which is on the level of beings like Mephisto and Nightmare, which y'all would get a Nightmare video later on, but by the cosmology of Marvel and feats shown consistently, and even my previous video and this video will be proving again that they transcend the god on a beyond transfinite scale. Now, not to waste too much time, we see Valeria, the daughter of Franklin and Susan Richards, gets Loki out of what Doom made. After that, in Loki's apartment, he holds a meeting with his friends talking about him being good, in which they know is a lie. As I explained earlier, how he's basically manipulating himself, as even the spirits of his new iteration keeps disturbing him after killing him trying to be good all the way from another comics. Even his future self laughs because he sees beyond the narrative's lies beyond being told. And as Loki meets Thor, an unworthy Thor, which this comic is partly from Agent of Axis, in which they are both linked. Loki and Amora do a little drop by just to take Sigurd and Lorelei to Odin, and they left for their mission, which is in the other comic of Axis. Even Odin tells him that being a hero as a god isn't just about saving people, but actually understanding humanity, which Loki isn't cut out for. And as Thor chases Loki to kill him, Loki tests himself if he is good or not by seeing if he is worthy by Mjolnir, and he basically fools Mjolnir because he could fool himself and the narrative via lies. And as he beats Thor to pulp, and at the end he tries rubbing it off in Thor's face, and he couldn't even take it afterwards, in which deep down it is all emphasized throughout about his lies. And in his apartment he talks to himself, and we see that truly it is his lies beyond the writers that did this, and even told Thor about and Verity the truth, that he killed his younger self, as well as him not being truthful, but he is the crime that will never be forgiven. As I said earlier, the whole point of his mission, which is the whole point of his mission. And as Thor starts beating him, we see the constant reference of truth and lies, which you all can see in the scans, which I have explained in several ways to be understood since the start of the video. Asgard abandons him as he gets banished to a space beyond space, an infinity beyond infinity, or transcendent space beyond the realms, which themselves are archetypal platonic myths beyond conceptuality. Loki meets Odin, who sees through reality and stories on his level of power, as he calls Loki the god of lies, who needs to embrace lies and remember what a lie is, which Loki lied beyond his concepts. Old Loki shows up after Loki gets sent back by Odin. He reveals everything Loki did to the Young Avengers, which you can read on the panels. And basically, he starts telling Loki a story of how he became him in the future, how he started his mission and ends them, how he would kill Earth and every hero and even use them to fight against King Thor. He basically goes through different comics talking about the comics of the past and the future in as he shows Emma Frost wielding Mjolnir and many more. And in one of the stories, as Thor tries to kill him, he runs into another comic. And as he keeps telling Loki about his stories, Loki starts burning into his lies and getting himself back from lies of narratives. And as Loki burns, he goes to the metaphorical void of his being, his true self, in which he has to choose what he truly is, which is the god of lies. And as he takes his crown, as he remembers what lies are, in which he says you can rewrite them, rewrite all stories, and he is ready to rewrite a different one, in which he burns bright and dies, but not really, as after 8 months, the sky turned red, and a knock at Verity's door. It is no other than Loki, the god of stories. In the next panel, we see Odin butt naked. The next panel, we see Odin butt naked, talking to these abstract shadow beings in his dream, in which Odin knew them and was in great shock as he thought they had been taken out during Ragnarok by Rune King Thor, and now they bring forth a new Ragnarok. Odin warns other gods, but no one takes him seriously. We see Loki and Verity having a conversation about the end of everything, and Loki is less bothered. Loki is less bothered about anything really, but he just knows he is the god of creation or stories. He is Verity's friend. The other Loki we know is gone for now, in which he mentions things that are very important here on out. He talks about the destruction of the omniverse, and no matter how much he is destroyed, there will always be stories left, and this is very true nonetheless. Up next is Ragnarok, as the gods prepare for battle, in which Loki visits his daughter, who is an aspect of death for the gods, the ruler of hell, and Tyr, the god of war. His main objective is retrieving people for war against Asgard, in which he also recruited Jormungandr, the world serpent, after killing Thor's stepbrother Baldur for getting in his way. While on the other hand, these two autistic gods think mortal weapons can kill their fellow high universal beings, which failed during the war. As you can see in this cast, the other warriors aren't dying, as Loki even points it out that what are they doing with mortal weapons, in which the Asgardians tremble at the sight of Jormungandr or Jormungand, the world serpent, in which young Thor, like in his 20s, couldn't beat. We also get a backstory on how Verity got her powers, which was a ring given to her father by his dad, and he lost it because his daughter swallowed it in, which it melted in her being and gave her the power because the ring was a lie detector. As the war goes on, we see Freya, who was going face to face with Loki, kicking him off Jormungandr, and strikes it with all her rune magic, destroying both herself and the serpent. And then Odin blows the horn, signifying Ragnarok, and letting everyone in every realm coincide, in which the battle got better as Sigurd and Lorelei got free to join the fight. On the other hand, Loki saves Verity's story, basically killing her and replacing her consciousness in a sort of bangle or bracelets with him, while he interacts with her soul. Sigurd and Lorelei journey to Valhalla to gather the dead, including the recently dead Freya, for Ragnarok. And as God of Stories Loki and Verity prepare for the new chapter opening in which God of Stories Loki is starting anew, King Loki basically uses his power to one-shot everyone, which Odin defends himself and Amara, the younger sister of Lorelei. God of Stories Loki then bleeds past King Loki, collecting his staff, and Loki starts making fun of King Loki, who should know the next thing since he is a future Loki, who should have been God of Stories at a point. But that isn't the case, as King Loki wanted just victory over anyone that threatens his ego, because if he of the rejected life he has always had, but that's one fate he couldn't rewrite. And as the gods came, he fled from the comics to a place known as the outside. He ran not because of fear, but him narratively losing. He can one-shot everyone there except God of Stories Loki if he wanted to, like he kinda did before casually. As God of Stories Loki decides not to take sides, right? And as the war continued, he saved the entire story while being the narrator as well as the writer at the same time, switching between panels and creating dialogues of explanations as he saved the entirety of the infinite stories of the gods. And then behold, we have the ones sitting above in shadows who request for the stories to be fed on. And then Loki decides to tell them a story of creation from beginning till the end. And all he had to do was exclude them from the story, and they went back to where they came from. And he says maybe they are the Beyonders, and this is because right now this is taking place during Secret Wars, where there are only two universes left, and beyond it is the immeasurable into high outer vessel tier, which is the outside, which light, and that's where King Loki ran to, and that's where the ones above in shadows were defeated. So them being the Beyonders is true. And as they spoke, which you all should read the scans, Loki ends up saving his story. And this is consistent for Secret Wars for a reason I mentioned earlier, as Silver Surfer is around here, which when I do an Everqueen video you will know, and I am making adjustments to the cosmology, but it isn't by a huge margin. As well as him saying many Thors and Doom, which is Secret Wars, and he's talking about God Emperor Doom, and also proof of avatars of Thor, which only few out of its transfinite amount could be saved. And if you've read Secret Wars, you will understand what I'm talking about. Literally everyone died. Now basically, as we move to 2019, Loki, who didn't want to rule, so he got the germs of fate and created a snowman powerful enough to eat Nightmare, who slammed him and Thor there. Now those germs were gotten from basically the Yggdrasil, from the Sisters of Fates most likely, and Thor takes Loki to the Hall of All-Knowing, which he thinks is in Asgard, but it is yet an infinitesimal of the true halls, which is an infinitesimal in Omnipotent City, and that's a facet as well in comparison to the House of Ideas, which I also explained in my next video. And before this, we already recently have proven consistently that Nightmare is infinitely above the gods as well as other splinter lords and realms. Nightmare also basically refers to the gods as the god realms as an estate and sees it as pan-dimensional, which pan-dimensional means infinite dimensional but varies based on context, as Loki is high autoversal in base and Nightmare sees him as such, which is basically an infinitesimal. Now I won't touch up on the issues, but just let's move to how powerful full God of Stories Loki is. God of Story Loki basically just can House of Ideas is basically below Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, which differs as Loki was on their level for the fact that he couldn't reshape the house itself, but could rewrite the comics. Okay, that sounded wrong. He's below them. In fact, he's actually below Nick's and God of Stories Vision, because he just goes to Boundless because Vision could is above. He could make characters boundless and infinite amounts all across all of Marvel to fight Nyx, and he was above the characters and even above Nyx. So God of Stories Loki would just scale to around Rune King Thor level, but above that, as Rune King Thor could one shot the ones above in shadows, and Loki just needed to tell the story of them, and also he would be able to tell the story of Rune King Thor. So he's just on a boundless scale, but above a bit. And if you found this video informative, that's all for today. Please do to like, share, comment, subscribe, and see you all next time. Peace.